All right, welcome back to another episode of EventHubs Talk and Block. I am John Catalyst Green. With me, as always, is John Velociraptor Guerrero.
Hello, hello. We are talking about, apparently a very controversial subject today. You want to intro us?
Yeah, we'll get right into it. And there's been a lot of outcry from some members of the community saying that hitboxes are basically leverless controllers should be banned. And the main culprit right here is, in recent times, has been this video from Hitbox showing Ryu doing his critical art in 4 frames. And normally that's going to take you at least 6 frames to do it on a pad or joystick if you executed it perfectly, which is extremely hard to do on a pad or a joystick. And more than likely you're going to be doing this about 10 or 15 frames, so it's going to take you about that much. I just went in really quickly and recorded myself doing, Ryu's critical art, as you can see here, and so yeah, that hitbox is noticeably faster when using this technique. And John, I've got to ask you right away, how did this strike you when you saw this footage?
So I think the first question we're trying to answer here, the big question we're trying to answer here, is hitbox steroids, right? Because they seem, and maybe in a few different ways, but you see that, and it's striking upon first viewing because you can see 4 frames, the super comes out, and when it's played in real time, it feels almost instant. That is going to elicit a response. That I look at that and I go, oh, that's really good. That is also not the entire picture, and people should not be basing their entire judgment off of what this presents to them.
Yes, and it's very easy to take a clip and edit it and make yourself look incredibly good about doing that. And this is not to knock Desk at all, because people have wondered, how come Desk doesn't enter tournaments and just destroy everyone, because his execution is clearly amazing, and it is. He has phenomenal execution. So does Sako, but Sako doesn't win everything that he does either. It's execution is just one part of the puzzle, and having an edited clip versus someone doing this in a real match and having them do it consistently is quite a bit different. And I actually got a live demo of Dustin doing this at EVO 2022. And again, I was like, it was damn impressive when I saw that. I was like, okay, yeah, that looks good. And I could see some people calling it game breaking, which they have been. They've been like, look, this is evidence we need to ban the hitbox. I still don't agree with that. I don't think that this alone, would justify that. And we're going to get into some of the particulars here. But I just want to make sure that people understand that an edited clip on Twitter that is designed to showcase what this technique is and doing it perfectly is quite a bit different than pulling it off when you've got your blood pressure going and you've gotten thrown 50 times by Mika and you've got to come back and do this and whatnot. It's easier said than done, and yeah, that's one of the main things I wanted to highlight.
This looks a lot sexier than it really is going to translate to. And that's not to say that this isn't a thing. This is a 4-frame super. Yeah. And you probably can't pull off a 4-frame super on other modes of play, or with other controllers, I should say. That is something. But again, it does not have as much gravity as it comes across as having right here. There are, like you were kind of getting at, so many more points to the multifaceted equation that goes into, what is fair playing ground and what do we accept as close enough to fair playing ground, and is this going to change the outcome of matches in such a way that it would be inappropriate? It certainly will change if hitboxes are allowed to be part of just the regular tournament experience. Then yes, there will be some scenarios where the fact that somebody had a hitbox affected the end of that round. But there's a ton of those kinds of variables. I mean, we're playing different characters there's things are not all the same across the board.
Say PlayStation 4, John. I know you want to say PlayStation 4. Say it. Yes. Yeah, there's a ton of different things. And this is also, again, a 4-frame critical art assumes you're doing the motion perfectly and you're holding each input for that single frame and you've just nailed it, right? And practical means you're probably going to be getting this in like 6 to 8 frames. You're not going to execute it perfectly. You're not going to just hold it for that split second of a frame to get it. This is not as easy to do as you would think. And again, when Dustin was showing me this, he messed it up a few times when he was going through it. And then he got it down and he was getting it, looked like every time. I don't think it was 4 frames every time. Like I said, it's falling more in the 6 to 8 frame range. And there you are. So to address the subject of this video, no, I don't think hitboxes should be banned. We're going to get into a lot of the particulars here, but overall, this is not a ban-worthy thing for a controller. John, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think that there are certain ban-worthy things where it would manifest, and the whole community would say, "That's a problem." That creates another way of thinking about it is that creates a competition that we're not interested in
Right.
because it's not showcasing the player's skill. And even something happened like that with this, right? Where you were able, I think it was especially in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, initially able to basically block in both directions by holding both buttons down, and that immediately we go, well, that changes Marvel vs. Capcom. You no
Yes.
longer have to block in Marvel vs. Capcom. That is not the experience we want. Now, an expedited super, that's something, but and then as you're saying, it's not that you're going to get it in 4 frames every time. It's not that you're going to have the execution every time, and there are even more facets of to analyze in this. But yes, short story or long story short, no, we need to run this experiment a lot more. If we start doing hitboxes, which by the way, hitboxes have been around for a while now.
Yes, a long time.
If every game's top 8 had 7 hitboxes in it, that would be a pretty worthwhile. Like, well, this is making waves. This is some cold hard data, some facts to look at where you go, okay, this might be a thing. But I mean, let the experiment run for a while and see.
Yeah, it's that classic thing of the FGC. It's like make an adjustment or just nerf the heck out of it, kind of thing, or in
Yeah.
this case, ban it, right? And again, you and I have been around for quite some time. The FGC, we're far more of like, let's run this experiment and get to it. But speaking of that, I want to talk about SOCD, which is an acronym that the hitbox people use, and it stands for simultaneous opposing cardinal directions. What that means is basically if you hold left and right at the same time, what does your controller do? Does it negate the input and basically put you in neutral? Does left supersede right or whatever? And Capcom has rules for this on the CPT website, which most other people have followed. And hitboxes are perfectly legal right now. They follow all the standards, and they actually have firmware where if the standards get updated, the hitbox people I know will go in there and update their firmware and make their controllers completely compliant. It's a simple firmware upgrade to change a lot of this stuff. Also, this can be changed on the developer level, where if the left and right input are entered at the same time, the developers can control if that goes to neutral or however that works. A lot of this stuff is able to be adjusted not only by the creators of the controller, but the developers of the game, plus the community has gotten in there a few times. Again, when the hitbox was first kind of taking off, I know that Daigo was using something called the Gaffro hitbox, invented by Gaffro, right? And because of that, how that handled inputs, it actually was deemed tournament illegal. Like, you could not use that controller, and he had to update the controller, and I think Daigo now uses an official hitbox and all that kind of stuff. Like, so getting back to it, I know that was a mouthful here, but I'm going to say this again. SOCD, simultaneous opposing cardinal directions, left and right at the same time or up and down at the same time, are basically it. How your controller dictates that outcome is really important here. And even with this SOCD sliding technique, this is what Dustin's doing in the video. It's entirely possible to get these moves to come out quicker than you could on a pad or joystick consistently. If you're using, like, for example, a keyboard, right? Like, it's the way that this controller handles the SOCD enables this sliding technique and makes it come out in 4 frames. But you could probably get this to come out on a keyboard in 6 to 8 frames as well. That is the advantage of a leverless or padless controller, and it's how come these hitboxes and other keyboard style controllers have taken off in popularity. And I come from a PC background. I was playing Quake and Doom and all this other kind of stuff, so I'm used to this keyboard and mouse stuff, and I'm used to a number of people already saying, hey, look, the keyboard's a vastly superior controlling device because of X, Y, and Z. And so this is nothing new to me. And I want people to understand that, like, it's not just the hitbox that's, this is a brand new style of controlling stuff in the FGC for the fighting game community, and people kind of need to get used to it and kind of understand it a little better before they go in super hardcore about, like, it being broken and busted.
People want to come to those black and white conclusions so quickly. A little bit of a story time here. When I first joined competitive FGC, this was back in 2010 or so, I played on the most readily available controller, which happened to be the Xbox 360 pad, right? Playing some Street Fighter 4. When my training partner and I went to our first tournament, everybody there had arcade sticks, and that was the given wisdom of the age. It's like you played on arcade stick, and it was something along the lines vaguely of you have more advanced advantage. You can do things on the arcade stick that you can't do as effectively on a pad. If you're playing on pad, you're not even being serious. And me being the young and impressionable raptor that I was at the time, I just took that in stride. And I don't even remember what the particulars were. Maybe it was more than this, but all I can recall is things like 100 hand slap, for instance, like those 5 inputs that you would have to get in quick succession and put into a combo. They would argue that that could only really be done on stick, not as much on pad. Well, you can do that on pad, you know, and people figure it out. And maybe it's easier on stick. Maybe it's more consistent. Maybe it takes more time to figure that out on pad. I don't know, but people figured it out, man. And even beyond that, so I was impressed and thought, okay, you have to play on stick in order to be legit. Well, we've seen plenty of champions, especially in recent times, do so or achieve their status on pad. You know, and then now it's not at all uncommon to see someone in a top 8 playing on a pad versus a stick. It's kind of just dealer's choice, and it's whatever. Now, if you were to take the wisdom of the day and go, yeah, you're not serious unless you're playing on an arcade stick, then you know you wouldn't have the openness to even entertain all of this and Smug and Knuckledew and all of these players that do really well on pad would just ignore them. What? Yeah. So I look at that and I look at the way it felt, at least to me, like people were viewing this and the conclusions that they were jumping to, and I go, you don't know all that you're talking about. You might have some truth. It might be quicker to push buttons on a stick than it is on a controller in some ways, or a pad in some ways, and the same is true for hitbox. But again, let's run the experiment before we jump to our conclusions, because what you see in a GIF, did I just say GIF? Yeah, GIF, that's right. What you see is not the whole story.
John dating himself a little bit by mentioning GIFs, but that would be Twitter clips or TikToks and other stuff for people of this era. But yeah, getting into it, there are advantages to playing on both stick and pad. I think that the ergonomics for both controllers, the stick and pad, are very well proven. And I know some of the hitbox players have complained about hand pain, and these are big time players like Tokido and Daigo. And those guys have been using joysticks for years without mentioning any kind of hand pain issues that I'm aware of. So that's something that I will just say I don't know that the hitbox is proven as the pad and the joystick in that regard.
I've heard of other players too that had to stop playing on hitbox and because they said that it was an issue for them.
Yeah, so I mean that's a thing out there, and repetitive stress injuries are no freaking joke, and I wouldn't wish those on anyone. And I don't want to go too on and on about that because maybe people are, they need to use a different technique for using it. There's other stuff like that. There's a lot of things in here, but where I come down on the hitbox pad joystick argument is play on whatever one that you like. If you're struggling with some of your execution for whatever reason and you feel like a different controller will help you and make you better, by all means go switch to that other controller. But if you're happy with what you're using, don't worry about it. Like, just use what you're happy with using, because all the controller types have their advantages and disadvantages. And people are going to give you a lot of bad advice out there and say, oh, use this, you can only use that. It's bullcrap. And it's proven to be bullcrap. There are advantages and disadvantages to every controller type. And it's what trade-offs do you want to make?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you play fighting games on PC, you actually have a hitbox sitting right in front of you with your keyboard. It's basically the same concept, just the buttons are different, and stuff like the SOCD will probably work differently as well. But if you do want to give a hitbox a try, like literally it's just the buttons, the Sonoma buttons and all that kind of stuff, and they use really top quality parts and stuff in there as well. I don't want to, there is a difference between playing on a hitbox and a keyboard, but the fundamental concept is really the same. It's literally it's just, the buttons are different.
But you could start splitting hairs and say, well, you have this concave button that you can slide your hand across much quicker, as opposed to like moving from one key and having to jump up to the height of the next key in order to slide your hand. And you go, yeah, but also, is that going to be the difference maker when it comes to a certain game? Or does that advantage immediately become eclipsed by the fact that you or your opponent has better decision-making skills under pressure, or picked a different character that excels in a certain situation, or the myriad of other factors that go into the difference between a win and a loss in any given round, right?
Exactly.
So, and you can see like walking DPs, that's an advantage, sure, but you can also make up for that advantage, and it's like, if you play the top tier character in a game versus if you play the 15th best character in the game, sometimes the 15th best character wins, even despite the advantages and such. And you are, most people that are ever going to listen to this are not playing at a level where the fact that their super coming out 2 frames, 3 frames slower than somebody else's super was the reason that they lost Evo Grand Finals, you know? So, yeah, it's not exactly fair, but it's also not, as far as I can tell so far, and I think as far as the community can tell so far, it's not unfair to the point that it's messing up the competitive process.
John, it's so much easier to blame the controller than me. So I'm just going to blame it on my controller and just say it's because I couldn't do that. And then it's not my fault. It's my controller's fault. But I do want to mention actually a little bit more about the SOCD stuff. How the hitbox and other controllers handle that could be ruled as too strong. And that changes must be implemented to the controllers to make them tournament viable. Capcom, again, states this in this rules, how these controllers must work. But they say in really clear sentence there, we reserve the right to change our ruling on this pretty much at a moment's notice. So they're monitoring this. I know that they do. The games can also be patched to address these type of things, although that can have, unforeseen circumstances, pop out from that as well. But this is something that's being actively monitored. But the SOCD, the simultaneous cardinal direction thing, like the left and right inputs at the same time, up and down inputs at the same time, that is an important subject that we do probably need to examine a little bit more, and that the community needs to educate themselves a little bit more on as well. And there's a great article on the Hitbox Arcade website, which we'll link to here in the description, which documents basically how this works and how they do this as well. So this is all stuff that is a really good discussion point in the community, and I'm really happy to see people in the community talking about this and trying to figure out what the proper methods are. Even the knee-jerk reactions are fine because that's how people feel right now. But let's see how things go in like a month or two or a year or whatever and kind of go from that. As you mentioned, the hitbox has been around for a long time. But these shortcuts, some of these things that people are figuring out are new. But if you could do this on a joystick, I don't think you'd see any complaints at all because, joysticks have been around since the get-go. That's how we initially started playing fighting games, right?
Are you entertaining the idea of jumping over to Hitbox?
I'm not. I'm a classic joystick player, and I'm really happy with my execution and other stuff playing on that. I use a Razer or Panthera, and I'm super happy with it. I have yet to see someone play on a hitbox where I'm like, that's cheap or dirty or whatever and stuff. Because again, come from that PC background, and it's like, yeah, this is just how people play these games, and it's a new way to play these games for the FGC, but it's not new to me at all.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm just lazy, and I don't want to have to learn a whole new thing. I had to jump from Xbox 360 pad to stick, and that was hard enough. But I also want to say that I've kind of been saying that a few frames don't really matter or aren't really significant. And at the same time, I've said many times that I hate input lag and I wish it would go from 7 or 8 down to 5 or 4. Well, did the frames matter then? Two very different things in this kind of context, because one applies to everyone all the time and it affects something else. This other thing is limited in its application, and it can be covered very quickly by other facets of gameplay. So I don't think that those two things are the same. For anybody that might already be leaving a comment, which you can still leave because we appreciate comments, but maybe say, oh, sorry, I was going to leave this comment and I was wrong. You're the best, John.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And one thing I know that you experienced firsthand as well was the complaints about Snake Eyes in Ultra Street Fighter 4 or Street Fighter 4 in general. People thought that basically he was using the D-pad and then like the analog pad or whatever to do like his walking 720s with Geef, but he just got really good at the execution with it. And it was shortly after that people realized that in some cases that playing on pad is far superior than playing on joystick for a grappler character. Doing the 360 stuff, you have less range of motion, and so therefore you're able to get it out faster. And then Arturo Sabin, he actually showed me that he had modded his joystick to have a shorter range of motion, and so you don't have to press up like I have to go 50% further than Arturo does basically. So he has a faster way of getting Yoga Tiger Gales out there, and I think he mentioned like he can get like plus 12 or whatever normally, but like with his modified stick he can get like plus 16. So he's cutting out an extra 4 frames or 3 frames or 1 frame, whatever it is, to get that extra bit of frame advantage and stuff on there. So you can do mods to joysticks and make them even better than they are right now too. I will really quickly, I want to switch gears just slightly here, because I did play on a hitbox at Evo, and I want to mention that like it's really nice to travel with something like a hitbox or a pad, because having a lever sticking out really makes traveling with a stick awkward. And I actually saw someone at Evo who had a hitbox in a super simple like pouch backpack, and they're lightweight and easy to throw in a bag and all that kind of stuff. And And there are some things that you can do on a hitbox that are really special, like what we've talked about before, but a few other things as well that you're going to struggle to replicate on a joystick or a pad. And I just, we're asking if we should ban the hitbox, but I do want to talk about the quality of the product that they've put out there. It is a really good product, and if you want to go and buy one, freaking get one. It's a good thing to invest in if you like that kind of control scheme. But if that's not for you, don't worry about it. And if this ends up being too dominant and too much of a problem, it's going to get dealt with. It's there's no way that people sit on their hands in the fighting game community. We're already directly expressing this, and we're talking about it. You kind of rolled your eyes there about sitting on the hands. You have a contrary, go for it.
No. I just thought it was funny sitting on hands and what we're talking about.
Oh, gotcha. So anyway, so this is we wanted to contribute to discussion and educate some people on here and give our thoughts and stuff out. But feel free to comment below with whatever your thoughts are. If you agree, if you think John and I are stupid morons and we don't know what we're talking about, feel free and go for it. There's going to be plenty of those as well. It's really, again, this show's about having a discussion. We want to talk to people about this and see. We don't know everything, but this is our opinion as it stands today.
Do you think hitbox should be banned? Let us know. Rip each other up in the comments. No, I'm just kidding. Be nice to each other in the comments. But yeah, I'm interested to see how the experiment plays out. And I'm also interested to see in that same, is hitbox steroids? Does it make people better? And does it have long-term negative effects on the physicality? There's a lot of questions, but I also think that it's, like I say, an experiment worth running. I want to see how the hitbox does. And also, it seems like a pretty good idea, guys. Like from what I can see so far, from what I've seen with people playing around me and such in my community and such, it's like, yeah, it's an idea. It's interesting to say the very least, and I think it'll stick around. I also don't think it's going to change the way the game is played, but it'll have an interesting evolution to the way the game is played, something like that.
There you go. All right, y'all, that's going to wrap us up for this week of EventHubs Talking Block. Once again, thank you all so much for listening, and we'll be back with you soon.